As y'all know, watching the program, we have a pretty big Democratic Party primary coming up in the state of Texas. We've been covering a few of those races, and we're very excited to be speaking to a candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Marcos Velez, who has a union experience and is running a kind of working class centered campaign here for Lieutenant Governor. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Hey, thank you guys for having me.
Well, let's get into some of your background here. I really want to focus a bit about like kind of policy and all these kind of things, but you do have a unique background for somebody who's running for office. A lot of Texas Democrats, I think, have been talking more about working class issues, and we can talk about how sincere we find that to be. But you actually have a background in labor. Could you tell us a little bit about your background here?
Yes, sir. So, hey, I'm a normal Texan, product of public education. After graduating from high school, I actually went to work in oil refineries, ended up landing at a union oil refinery. It was actually the same refinery my mother worked at. A good union job was what changed her economic situation. And so working at the refinery, got really involved in labor, got really involved in advocacy, and ended up working my way up through the ranks. Local union president, I was treasurer, worked my way up to servicing staff, working for the International Union, bargaining collective bargaining agreements that covered different sites. Now I'm the assistant director for District 13. I cover Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Aruba. And so pretty wide range of workers that we deal with. I work with workers from just about every major industry: glass, paper, oil. We have public sector members. So it's very large group of normal everyday people that go to work every day for a living.
Well, we'll get into the race in just a second, but I do think it's really important to kind of note, like, Texas does have these kind of like strongholds of union power, but as a whole, a lot of labor in Texas is unorganized, and a particular industry is hard to do that in, is like oil and gas. And I just want to hear your pitch as somebody who's been a member of a union, been organizing for a long time within a union. Like, you're talking to somebody who's working in oil and gas, and they say, "Oh, I don't want to be a part of a union," or "There's no real difference for me. I work hard. I'm an individual. I take care of myself. Why do I need to be in a union?" I'm just curious to hear your kind of pitch when you're talking to everyday folks, what that union difference is.
Yeah. And so look, it is a really hard thing for people to grasp when they've never been members of a union. I'll tell you the biggest difference is the fact that you have a voice, you have rights, you have recourse. So in the state of Texas, very minimal worker protections. Members of a union, they have a collective bargaining agreement. They have that stability. They know the rules of engagement. You know exactly when you can take your vacation. You know exactly what you can be fired for. You know exactly how to move up and down between jobs. You know exactly when you're going to get your next raise. You know exactly what your next raise is going to be. And so I think people who are members of a union, the biggest difference is stability. Where outside of a union, you're an at-will employee. You can be terminated for any reason. In a collective bargaining agreement, it breaks down, hey, you have to be terminated for cause. And a lot of people mistake that and say, oh, unions protect bad workers. Hey, that's a myth pushed by corporate America. The reality is union workers get fired, but they get fired for just cause. And so the boss can't terminate you because he doesn't like the way you look. He's got to terminate you because you violated a rule.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's pivot to this election here. So one, you're running for office, so you don't have the typical background of somebody who, of a politician here. So what was it that made you want to run for office? And two, what specifically about lieutenant governor was of interest to you?
Sure. And so I think everybody's well aware of the fact that all Americans are talking about kitchen table issues right now. We have these politicians, they come around, they shake our hands, they ask for our votes. But life for everyday Texans, everyday Americans just seems to progressively slide backwards. And so for me, what really motivated me was looking at the world that I came into when I graduated from high school and looking at the world that my children are entering. And so I looked at the amount of economic opportunity that existed for me as a young man. I graduated high school before I even turned 18, and there was a world of jobs. We used to joke around like you could throw your toolbox in the back of your truck and drive next door, and you could do that for days and days and days, and you would never run out of job opportunities. Now, when you got into the workforce, the jobs that are available don't pay very well. We see people struggling to make ends meet, even working full time. And I genuinely believe in the saying that one job should be enough. We live in the state with one of the lowest minimum wages. Texas has a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. There are 30 other states that pay a higher minimum wage than Texas, yet we have the 8th largest economy in the world. And so being one of the representatives that works for the union and deals with workers on a day-to-day basis, I have a lot of interaction with elected officials. And what I've noticed is while they seem to be worker aligned when they're talking to us about their support, their actions and the fruit of their labor does not seem to yield very much pro-labor legislation. And so obviously, as any other voter would do, you educate yourself on what each position does. And the lieutenant governor is a position that prioritizes legislation. He appoints people to committees, and he directs the flow of what's going to move in the Texas Senate. And so for me, instead of beating my head against the wall and saying, you know what, I hope one day this candidate will produce themselves, I had a conversation with some of the guys at the AFL-CIO and the Texas AFL-CIO and some of my coworkers, and we talked about what we thought the ideal candidate would be. And then we looked around the table. We were all waiting for someone to raise their hand. And one of the guys said, hey, you should do it. And I said, hey, you know what? I will do it because I genuinely care about working class people. I'm not looking for any kind of notoriety or personal gain. I'm sick and tired of watching schools be underfunded. I'm sick and tired of watching working class Americans fall behind. When politicians say that like they understand kitchen table issues, they understand them from afar. They have to visit our communities to understand what we deal with. But I'm a normal working Texan. I go to work every single day. I work on my own vehicles. I go to my children's sports events. I'm in the community. I don't have to visit the community to understand what people are suffering from.
Yeah, well, I mean, for people who watch this program are familiar with what's been going on in Texas, the past few cycles have been very, very anti-worker. And
Yes,
I'm
sir.
curious what specifically, I want to get to education a second, if that's okay, but like what specifically particularly on like the workers' issues, are you most interested in trying to impact if you are to become the lieutenant governor of Texas?
Sure. So, opportunity is a big deal. And so people always like to make workers out to be lazy or, they just have to work harder. Obviously, we know that division is created by corporate America. Anytime working people have gotten together and fought collectively for change, we've come out ahead. The lieutenant governor has a lot of power over state sponsored apprenticeship programs. We do not have the same number or the same quality of apprenticeship programs that we used to have. And a lot of that comes because they're not a priority. If I was a young person coming out of high school today, I don't know that I would have the ability to enter a apprenticeship program that would help me further my personal financial situation. And so we need to increase the number of, apprenticeship programs available to young Texans. From a workforce standpoint, we have to raise the state minimum wage. $7.25 is not even close to a living wage. And so no one buys the argument, whether they're conservative or liberal, that $7.25 is something you can support a family on. And I think Americans have finally seen through the BS that look, these are not temporary jobs. Go to a hotel and tell the person that's cleaning your room that that's a temporary job. Go to a restaurant and tell the person that's serving your food or cooking your food that that's a temporary job. These are real jobs. They're labor and it should be respected as such, and they should be paid for what they do. But then beyond that, you get past apprenticeships, you get past the minimum wage. Look, there's a lot of money spent in Texas. If we spend money in Texas, we should easily be able to pass legislation to support not only buying American, buying Texan, but we should be able to pass legislation that promotes project labor agreements. They protect people against wage theft. They ensure that quality work is done. But these are all things, they make sense to working Texans. If you go to any Texan and you say, hey, if your road is going to be built, do you think that road should be built by a competent person? It should be done in a timely manner, and we should ensure that they're paid fairly. They're going to say yes. But then when we get into the minutia of politics and all the stuff that they like to do to distract people from the real issue, I heard that what you guys are trying to do is going to increase the cost. At the end of the day, Texas has plenty of money. We're not spending it on the people that keep this state moving.
And I will just note to the audience, I mean, this is a state that has been pushing over a surplus, time and time again. And this is something that, when the government has that much money, that means that's money that's not coming back into the economy, back to you. I wanted to ask specifically about a couple of things that have come through the most recent leg cycles. One is the Death Star bill, which is basically like a massive preemption bill. People who watch the show, I've written about it in multiple places. It's basically a bill that kind of, preempts local governments, county governments from being able to do things like passing water break protections, labor protections, environmental protections, all of this kind of stuff. And the threat is that it will prevent Texans on the local and community level where there have been a lot of gains, particularly for labor, from being able to see those things come to fruition. I mean, how high on the priority list is kind of seeing that pull back for you?
It's at the very top,
Yeah.
right? I mean, look, let's be honest. I made a comment the other day. It actually went viral for the wrong reasons. People didn't understand what I was saying. But I said on Telemundo the other day that it's a shame we live in a state where a dog has more rights than a worker. And what I meant was, and I spelled this out, but people only watch a short bit of the clip. In the state of Texas, you cannot leave a dog outside without water, rightfully so. You should not leave an animal outside without water. But there is no law that says that you have to allow a construction worker or any other kind of worker the ability to drink water. And when we get to the point in Texas where local communities are saying, hey, we want to do the right thing, all of a sudden at the state level, we remove that right. And so, I mean, it's counterintuitive that you would say a human being shouldn't have the right to take a water break in a state where every single summer in Houston, we have over 100 days, over 100 degrees. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. No, and I mean, I'm just curious. Again, with both you running for office and your experience as a labor organizer, as a worker, as somebody involved in working in Texas. One of the refrains that we get specifically on the water break issue is that, this is like a hypothetical, like no boss would ever work to kind of prevent their people on the job from being able to, one, be safe and have access to water. And I'm just curious, what your response is to somebody who might make that argument that like, we don't need the government to kind of mandate water breaks because that's just kind of common sense and it'll be given to Texans across the board.
Hey, so look, as someone that has worked in the Texas sun, as someone that's worked 16-hour shifts in the 90% humidity, I think people are privileged to have that viewpoint because the reality is if you've ever worked outside and you've ever worked for a bad foreman, because I've worked for some good guys, but look, these companies, they're worried about profit. And at the end of the day, if they think that you taking 15 minutes to climb off that tower or to lower you down in that crane basket or do whatever if it stops the work, they're not interested in it. And a lot of people say, well, just carry water with you. But like, how many of these hands-on jobs can you do carrying around a gallon of water strapped to your waist? Yeah. It's a lack of understanding, but it's division that's created by these corporate entities because, again, if you keep workers divided on these menial issues, they can't band together and fight for justice. I think if people understood, no one wants to be trapped outside in the Texas heat without even the opportunity to go get water. But again, they think it's ridiculous because in their mind, they don't ever see a situation where a worker would be denied water. And for normal workers that work outside, for bad bosses, that's a reality.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's pivot a little bit and talk about education. As you noted earlier, you're a product of Texas public schools. These are something that has been under attack, most notably with this voucher bill. Is this something that, what is the kind of plan when it comes to the Senate, when it comes to Lieutenant Governor to kind of deal with this? Is this something that you think is reasonable to say, for example, that like you would be able to undo in like one cycle? What is your sense on this education question when it comes to vouchers?
So look, I am not a big fan of vouchers. Here's the issue with the voucher situation. Those vouchers are going to more negatively impact rural Texas than anyone else. For the few number of people that win that lottery system and they're able to secure a $10,000 voucher to put towards the cost of their children's private school education, you're stripping over $1 billion out of Texas education funding for everyone else that doesn't get one. And I think people fail to realize that over 60% of Texas counties do not have a single private school. Most people have never been to Claude, Texas. They've never been to Dumas, Texas. They've never been to, you go through like Post. How many people have been to Post, right? They might have seen it in the movie Hell or High Water, but most people have not been to Post, Texas. And so Hearn, a little bit bigger city, but a lot of people have not been to Hearn. Texas is a huge state. The fact that over 60% of Texans will suffer because of this bill, it's unacceptable. And I don't understand how we got to a place in society where we lost value for education because teachers are professionals. They provide a valuable service to our society. it shouldn't even be a debate as to whether or not we fund schools. And funding schools goes further than just making sure they have the money that they need to operate. They should have the money they need to thrive. We can always build a multi-million-dollar football stadium, but when we have a conversation about paying for teacher salaries or pensions, all of a sudden we have a problem. There's a shortage of money. And I think it's a prioritization issue. There's not a shortage of funds in the state of Texas. There's a shortage of people prioritizing what matters to everyday people.
Well, let's talk about everyday people here. I mean, you're a Texan. You know what's been going on in this state. The Democratic Party in Texas has been out of power for a very, very long time. In fact, there was talk after 2018 and in 2020 that we might be seeing some kind of shifts in favor of the Texas Democrats. Now, we're in the wake of this 2024 election where a lot of groups that, traditionally had voted Democratic didn't and are kind of leaving the party. When you go and you talk, you read the reporting, a lot of people feel like the Democratic Party isn't fighting for them, isn't working for them, doesn't have their best interests at heart. So one, I'm curious if you agree with that assessment of the state of the Democratic Party, and how would you represent something different for those folks who have left and stopped voting for the party?
So look, I agree with that assessment. It's painful, but anyone that's ever gone and voted in the last couple of Democratic elections, you go in and you punch that ballot basically holding your nose. And I think the Democratic Party has gotten really comfortable with the fact that they know that stronghold Democratic voters are going to choose the Democratic nominee. And so they shove candidates at us that are unpopular. And they just assume that like politics is this place where you spend some time here and then the next job is just a natural succession, right? I mean, it's like tenure at a job site, but I don't think politics was ever intended to be a lifelong career. I think politics is service, and it's service that people from the community should be doing. And as long as you can read and you have a basic understanding of the law, I think you're qualified to serve as a public servant. Everybody has a different office that calls them. But what has really killed the Democratic Party is they've become a party of elitists that are so far away from the normal blue collar worker that they lost their base. And then their plan, in my opinion, and very critical of a party that I'm running under their banner. But I mean, hey, look, I'm a voter. They need to hear this. Their plan, in my opinion, was to wait for the body of voters to die off and a younger group to come in. And eventually that younger group would make up for the fact that they had candidates that people couldn't relate to. Instead of looking for different candidates, we're just going to look for different voters. And it's like, hey, how about you come with a message that actually appeals to people? But also, how about you come with some level of sincerity? Because it's rare that you see a candidate that you're like, hey, you know what? That guy understands me. I've seen that guy in my neighborhood. That looks like a guy you could drink a beer with or you could barbecue with. No, I mean, or woman, right? It's like, hey, that lady, she looks like she has a passion for this. No, you have people that like seem very entitled. They seem very disconnected. And when they talk about issues, they're talking about them from some like foreign place. They don't have a full grasp of what the average everyday American goes. When they talk about affordability, how many of them have ever like worried about paying a light bill? How many of them have ever wondered how they were going to feed their children? How many of them have ever wondered like, man, how am I going to get to work tomorrow? They don't live the day-to-day struggles. And so they don't have that for the people, by the people. It's good for thee, but not for me. And I mean, that's what turns people off to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty astute analysis, and I'm curious though. Affordability has become a kind of buzzword with Democratic Party politicians. So, how can we what kind of things do we need to be hearing from politicians, including yourself, to kind of prove that Democrats, or at least in your case, you are actually out there looking out for these working class issues, instead of just saying, okay, this is an affordability election. If I say affordability, if I say workers' rights, we got folks like, what are these kind of bread and butter things that people need to be hearing?
So I think the difference, I'm not a politician. I'm a labor advocate. I'm a professional negotiator. I'm someone that fights for wages, affordability, healthcare every single day. I don't know that it's my job to coach these politicians that have failed us so terribly on what they need to be saying. But if they actually have any interest in what a normal Texan thinks, hey, look, instead of talking about the issues, how about you actually do something about them? I can honestly say that my every single day experience, my work that I do on a daily basis, is fighting to raise wages, is fighting to improve working conditions, is fighting to provide affordable health care. Those are things that I do every single day. So I think what's different about me is I'm just taking the work that I do every single day And look, bargaining against multinational corporations for workers is not something that comes easy, because a lot of people ask about like being a Democrat in power in Texas. Look, I'm always in a hostile environment. You don't walk in and sit down with a multi-billion-dollar corporation and tell them, hey, even though payroll only makes up 1% of your expenses, you need to increase it to 1.2%. Hey, that's going to hit their EBITDA. And they're like, no, we're not doing that. We have no interest in doing that. So, power concedes nothing without a demand. Frederick Douglass said that. You know, we have to go in and we have to focus on things that actually impact everyday people. And that has to be our priority. And for me, my priority as lieutenant governor is going to be addressing the same issues that I address for union workers, but for the entire state of Texas. Everyone should be able to survive on a single job. Everyone should be able to afford housing. Everyone should be able to eat. Everyone should be able to have access to healthcare. Those should not be radical ideas. Again, I mean, the amount of prosperity that we have in this state, it's not even a question of money. It's a question of priorities and what we do with that money.
I'm going to, send everyone to your website in just a second, but I want to ask you specifically, over the past few years, and we just have seen this over this past week, civil rights, democratic rights to be protected from violence have been violated in the state of Texas and nationally. I'm just curious where you see, for example, as a Texan, as somebody running for a position in the state government, how you see the state government's role in this relationship with organizations like ICE, which have been terrorizing people across the state and across the country.
Yeah. So look, first of all, and I'm dating myself, but there was a time that we existed before ICE, right? I mean, it was created in the early 2000s. In Texas, you have a very unique relationship too, because you have border security and then you have ICE. These guys that are running around cosplaying to be police officers, shooting people in the face, it's disgusting. And again, they're basically domestic terrorists. You should not run around and shoot people in the face. Look, trained police officers wouldn't do that. We could go on and on for days, but here's what I'll tell you. No one in Texas wants violent criminals roaming the streets. And the same argument that ICE is protecting us from violent criminals is the argument that I would use on why they have no business roaming the streets shooting people. They're the violent criminals. They're violating people's constitutional rights. They're harming everyday working people. And look, here's the reality. If someone is a threat, if they've broken the law, we have several law enforcement agencies that we could fund to take care of that. This group of cosplayers that we have running around, it's political theater. And again, it's very concerning that they're not meeting the minimum requirements to be a law enforcement officer. How would you feel being a police officer with Tech Close certification, knowing everything you had to do to get hired and all the requirements that you have to meet to do your job? And then you've got a guy running around with a criminal record and doesn't have to identify himself, because most police officers are required to identify themselves. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, what we're doing right now is political theater, and it's unacceptable.
Well, last question I have before we let you go, and I appreciate your time so much, is just the system of Texas government in general. Texas is constitutionally is like a weak governor state. That power has been seized by Governor Greg Abbott. You look at something like Operation Lone Star, where they're just funneling money, in my opinion, illegally to these kind of border operations. And, the only check that he would have would be the ledge, which has not been interested in kind of challenging him. So I'm curious, what you think about, if you agree with this assessment about the overreach of the governor, and how you would want to curtail that power if you were to be elected lieutenant governor.
Hey, so look, have zero interest in going in and being a standard Democrat that just capitulates to the Republican power that exists right now. If it's good for working people, then it's good for me, right? But none of the policies that we've prioritized in this state in the last 30 years have been good for working people. I am not scared of Greg Abbott. I have no power standing up to his multinational donors. And I tell people all the time, these multinational corporations are the ones that are really pulling the strings. When you talk to a politician, you're not really talking to them. You're talking to their donors. And so, hey, look, I deal with the people directly right now. Greg Abbott does not concern me at all, but I'm not cowing down to him. I'm not backing down to his BS. We are going to push a pro-worker agenda, a pro-Texan agenda. And the funny thing is, that's a bipartisan position. When it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, if it's better for your pocketbook, then you're interested in it. The thing is, we have to make sure that people understand what our priorities are and not hide behind like culture wars and oh my God, this is going to be bad for Texans. Really, how so? Please explain how making more money is worse for Texans. Explain how having more jobs is worse for Texans. Explain how like losing our status as the state with the highest number of uninsured people for health insurance is bad for Texans. But again, a rising tide lifts all boats, and we're long overdue here in Texas.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on Left Reckoning. How can people keep up with the campaign?
Hey, yeah, look, if people are interested, Velez for Texas, VELEZFORTEXAS.com. Very simple. All my socials are linked there. I'd love for people to come check out the page. Really cool videos up and some information about what we're fighting for.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Left Reckoning.
Hey, thank you so much.
Well, that was great.